It's, so welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, good evening, good night, or good morning to all of you. We are so pleased to have people in this meeting from all over the world in different time zones. I am Shakira Mohammed from Trinidad and Tobago, a teacher for the past 15 years, and this is our 189th edition of our Zoom public meeting. And we wish to sincerely thank all of you who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Pan-Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora Global Project. For 188 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. And in the past 3 years and 11 months, we have featured 793 presenters from all parts of the world speaking on 188 topics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. And in order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we are kindly asking for suggestions as well as volunteers and donations. And you can contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for details. So, ladies and gentlemen, our moderator this evening or tonight is Shalama Mohammed, the co-director of the Zoom platform, who is a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA. Shalama, welcome.
Thank you so much, Shakir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Namaste, and a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for choosing to be here with us. This public meeting will take the form of a celebration of the life of the first Indo-Trinidadian Prime Minister, Mr. Basdeo Panday. Members of the audience will be invited to pay tribute to him at the end of the presentations by our speakers. And we hope that the program will last about 2 hours. This meeting is being recorded live and would be uploaded later on YouTube permanently for posterity. We are also live streaming on the YouTube channel of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. So I want to say welcome to all our viewers on YouTube. In order to avoid intrusions from trolls, everyone has been muted. Speakers, please do not admit anyone, do not unmute anyone, and do not allow anyone to share your screen. We appreciate your cooperation. So this is our Conversations with Elders, part 16. We mourn the loss of the Honorable Basdeo Panday. He was born on May 25th, 1933, and lived a full life. He transitioned to the next part of his soul's journey on January 1st, 2024. He was a lawyer, politician, trade unionist, actor, and former civil servant, and so much more, whose characteristic wit and charisma will be sorely missed. Mr. Panday served as the 5th Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago from 1995 to 2001. He was the first person of Indian descent and the first Hindu to hold the office of Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. We were privileged to have him as a speaker on this program in April of 2023. His body now lies in state and will be cremated on Tuesday next week. He will be the first person in Trinidad and Tobago to be given a state funeral under Hindu rites. Our sincere condolences to his wife, Oma, his 4 daughters, siblings, relatives, friends, whether you are in Trinidad and Tobago or in any other part of the world. Before we invite our panel of speakers, we would like to play a song which became very popular when Mr. Panday became the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago in 1995. Shakira, can we please have Suhani Raat by Mohammed Rafi?
सुहानी रात ढल चुकी ना जाने तुम कब आओगे सुहानी रात ढल चुकी ना जाने तुम कब आओगे जहाँ की रुत बदल चुकी ना जाने तुम कब आओगे नजारे अपनी मस्तियां दिखा दिखा के सो गए, सितारे अपनी रोशनी लुटा लुटा के सो गए। हर एक शम्मा जल चुकी, ना जाने तुम कब आओगे, सुहानी रात ढल चुकी, ना जाने तुम कब आओगे।
So Suhani Raat was dubbed the national anthem when Mr. Panday became the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. And Anil Beam, the late Anil Beam, recreated the song, and now that anthem, the reference to it as an anthem has been immortalized. So I hope you all enjoyed that, and it's something that we will never forget, and it's especially because of its association with Mr. Panday's reign as Prime Minister. I want to welcome our first speaker today, and that is Dr. Ferdie Ferrera. He's a 91-year-old political commentator, columnist, and founding member of the ruling People's National Movement Party. He was a close friend of Mr. Panday's and our first Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams. He was also an advisor to Dr. Eric Williams when he was the Prime Minister. Welcome, Dr. Ferdie Ferrera. Can you unmute, please?
Right.
Great, we can hear you now.
Thank you very much for your kind sentiments, and thank you for inviting me to be part of those paying tribute to my dear friend and political colleague. First of all, I wish to extend to Mrs. Panday, the children, and the rest of the Panday family my deepest condolences on the passing of my dear friend and political colleague. What more can I say about this iconic patriot that has not already been said about the good old Baz, a political colossus who straddled the national political stage for over 6 decades. From a humiliating defeat in 1966, losing his deposit in the constituency of Napariba South, he subsequently successfully navigated our turbulent political waters using his own political compass, not only becoming our 5th Prime Minister, but our first Prime Minister of East Indian origin against all odds. Who was this man? This relatively young man of East Indian origin, a product of indentureship and all the negatives that accompanied this inhuman form of Western civilization, capitalism. Several scholars, columnists like myself, political activists have written about this iconic patriot, this character, this foxy, witty, and sometimes unconventional, unpredictable character. Much more will be documented in the future. Unfortunately, like so many of our political nation builders, he has left us without completing his biography. Stories and encounters he alone can correctly tell. I can only hope that his devoted and loving wife and children ensure that we and posterity are not deprived of this valuable aspect of our history. I am sure that in spite of all that has been said and written, there is much more that is still unknown about the clever old fox, both in his public and private life. He's our only Prime Minister who has enjoyed his retirement almost to the maximum. As a former Prime Minister, he has enjoyed an unprecedented level of affection, love, goodwill, and admiration right across the racial and political divide. I can speak with some authority, having witnessed on many, many occasions, including the launching of my biography, Political Encounters, on the 14th of June 2017, attended by the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, and nearly all of his cabinet members. The number one attraction, the launching, attended by a large cross-section of our national community, was Basdeo Panday. It is against this background that we celebrate and continue to research the life of Basdeo Panday, a citizen who dedicated almost his entire life to the service of his fellow men, relentlessly and vigorously pursued his dreams and ambitions. Many, many times, falling victim to political assassins of his own making, whom he discovered, promoted, and trusted. The clever old fox was no political saint, both practicing and falling victim to his own political mantra and perception. Politics has a morality of its own. In the political jungle, where the name of the game is the survival of the fittest, politicians' lust for power can sometimes be brutal, unpredictable, and sometimes ruthless and unforgiving. The old Baz was not very much different from his predecessors. There are countless stories of his sometimes unconventional and unpredictable behavior, his sometimes inappropriate and intemperate utterances, many times counterpunching way below his political avoirdupois, raising eyebrows and becoming cause for national concern. Was he ready for office? Can he be trusted? Most of the time, however, in the final analysis, he proved his accusers wrong and went on to win the attention and attraction that ensured his successful journey of becoming our fifth Prime Minister and the most popular Prime Minister in our history. In my 70 years as a political activist, witnessing the passing of our four previous Prime Ministers, inclusive of the father of the nation, I have never seen such an outpouring of sympathy, condolences, and goodwill. Whatever his successes, his faults, which he had more than his fair share of, he personified and radiated, more so after his departure from office, a radiance that reflected our true national spirit. He was always available to the media and all those who requested his service and attention, clearly demonstrating that in spite of politics having a morality of its own, there should be no chronic antagonisms, no everlasting confrontation, no personal vendetta and victimhood, recognizing at all times that the national interest should supersede personal and party interests. He was neither faultless nor blameless. His contribution to the building of our nation and our national development is well documented, very much so in his political biography documented by Professor John Gaffer Laguerre. I will not join the chorus to canonize him, or, like some of his political assassins, to defy him. But certainly join the celebration of this remarkable and outstanding citizen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ferrera. Quite an adjective-filled presentation. May I ask you, what do you think would be an appropriate national honor for Mr. Panday?
Well, my dear, I have a concept of life that so in this country, in order to be celebrated and respected and admired, you must play dead. So I am not, whatever his family agrees to, I will be supportive. I'm not going to make any suggestions as to what. As I said before, he standing an exemplary who served this development and deserve whatever rewards, even posthumously.
Thank you very much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to our second speaker now, and this is Dr. Tim Gopeesingh, a medical doctor and former Minister of Education under the People's Partnership Government from 2010 to 2015. He was the Member of Parliament for Caroni East from 2007 to 2020. Welcome, Dr. Gopeesingh.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be with you all. And good evening, and whatever time of the day it is, wherever you are, my salutations and greetings. It is really a distinct honor and a privilege for me to speak of a national warrior, a fighter, a gladiator, a liberator, and a visionary leader, the Honorable Basdeo Panday, for whom almost 6 decades of his life he dedicated to politics and to the people and citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Our country, Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, even globally, has truly lost one of the greatest sons of our soil, a man whose life service to Trinidad and Tobago was nothing short of trailblazing, inspiring, and I would say heroic. The memory of Basdeo Panday is indelibly etched into the hearts, as Ferdie Ferrera said just a while ago, of almost all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and those he interacted with regionally and internationally. He defied and overcame obstacles of consignment to social and economic marginalization of his own private life as a child, walking to school bare feet, and having to move to San Fernando to get a secondary education, and then working in the public sector to save money and so on, to become a lawyer, economist, and have knowledge of drama and so on. And he became, I think, one of Trinidad and Tobago's greatest trade unionists, politician, prime minister, and perhaps the greatest patriot in our nation's history, and may be considered as a father of our nation as well. So from a secondary school in San Fernando, where his family took him for him to get his secondary education, he passed all his exams, began working in the public service, and I heard him said that he saved about $500 and traveled to London on an Italian ship in 1956, where he qualified in drama, economics, and law. I believe he was the second attorney in Trinidad who became attorney and economist as well. So he returned to Trinidad in 1962, and he would tell the story of his on the way to take a postgraduate scholarship to India. But he was persuaded then by someone in South Trinidad, Stephen Maraj, who was leader of the opposition Democratic Labour Party in 1962, to remain in Trinidad. Why you have so many degrees and you want to go and get more, stay and help the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So he then joined the Workers and Farmers Party, which many people thought was a Marxist party, with CLR James, Jack Kelshaw, George Boren. I think Ferdie Ferrera would remember them. James Millett. He fought elections in 1966. And all of them lost the deposit. They didn't get more than 3.5% of the votes of the population. That's history. All of them lost their deposit. In 1972, he was appointed a senator and then a leader of the opposition in 1976. In fact, as I can recall, he was leader of the opposition for 5 parliamentary terms. In 1986, he gave way to Mr. Robinson in that crucial discussion for who is going to lead the NAR, and there was discussion with Lloyd Bess and Carl Hudson Phillips and A.N.R. Robinson, Mr. Panday, and he willingly gave way to Mr. Robinson so that they could have won the election in 1986. And that is history. They did win the election, 33-3. And in 1988, there was a fallout in the government, and where Mr. Panday had to, I believe, because of the pressures put on him then, he broke away from the government then and moved with a number of his colleagues out of that and formed Club 88. And a few months later, launched the United National Congress. Mr. Panday is gone, but never forgotten. His struggle was a struggle for the people. His trials and tribulations were deep, but he withstood them all. You heard Ferdie speak about some of them. Today, Trinidad and Tobago, Caribbean, and the world mourn his passing. And he is the first political leader of our political party, of which 34 years now. And I have been a member probably from 1993. That's about 30 years myself. And today's political leader, Mrs. Bisessa, is probably just almost the same amount. Wade Mark and Rudy Munila, we are the ones who are still within the political circle from the days of Mr. Panday with the UNC. His charisma, his vision, his mission, and objective combined have left a rich legacy. So the late and great Basdeo Panday left an institution, the United National Congress, that we hope that will live forever. He's established this institution 34 years ago on April 30th, 1989, and had incorporated a body of principles which he espoused and he fought for, the principles of equality, social justice, and a better way of life for all citizens. He was committed to a system of meritocracy, and in October 1990, he became leader of the opposition. And he walked out with John Humphrey, Kelvin Ramnath, Trevor Sudama, Emmanuel Hussein, and Raymond Palakdari Singh. And in 1991, he fought the elections against the PNM, as everyone knows, and he won 13 seats and continued to work for the poor, the marginalized, the downtrodden, the voiceless, and he defended the interests of the poor and working class people with vigor and enthusiasm. There was a snap election in 1995, and I remember my time with him. I assisted him in forming the National Unity Platform, which saw the United National Congress winning 17 seats from its previous 13 in the 1995 general elections. Mr. Panday's historic achievement of becoming the first Indo-Trinidadian Prime Minister. I led a National Unity Platform comprising members of the NAR, Winston Ducaran, Clive Pantin, Jennifer Johnson, Joe Tony, George Lackey, Robert Sabga, Roy Augustus, etc. We transferred 100,000 votes from the NAR to the UNC, and UNC moved to 230,000 votes and got 17 seats. And Mr. Robinson willingly gave, well, after some discussions, the 2 seats in Tobago, so that Mr. Panday became Prime Minister. He was the first Indo-Trinidadian to become Prime Minister, the first Hindu to become Prime Minister, the first Labour leader to be Prime Minister. And East Indians in Trinidad and Tobago, who had Mr. Panday's photographs at their murtis and at their places of worship, were able to live to see an East Indian become Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. Many people said after that they could have died because they lived to see an East Indian become a Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. But Mr. Panday worked for all groupings and all classes and all races and all creeds of people in Trinidad and Tobago. He knew no issue of race and class. That was never within his even thinking. He gave the Shouter Baptist a public holiday in 1999. He legalized the Orisha marriage, and as a labor leader for the All Trinidad Sugar and General Workers Trade Union, in March 1975, he suffered immensely physically on Bloody Tuesday when so many scores of citizens taking part in that march against oppression and against dictatorship is known as the Bloody Tuesday. And I remember seeing the photographs of these, but he was bloodstained and beaten. But he continued to work. And he guaranteed as a sugar worker, as a prime minister, he guaranteed work for all during his time as a labor leader. He ensured that there was guaranteed work for all the sugar workers all through the year. Then there equality of pay for men and women. And there was 100% increase in salaries of sugar workers from $5.04 to $10.08. He had low-cost housing for the sugarcane workers. And most important, he abolished child labor. And that act of abolishment of the child labor sent the young East Indian boys and girls away from the sugar plantation into schools. And for the first time, you began to see these young East Indian boys and girls graduating as doctors, lawyers, engineers, and coming into society as having born out of the sugar workers' families and parents. And that is as a result of Basdeo Panday's work on abolishing the child labor. He expanded the sugar industry, in fact, and there was as prime minister, he established a national minimum wage. He abolished the sectoral wages. He was strongly committed to the young, to the elderly, to the women, and to the working people. Mr. Panday operated as prime minister when oil was $9 US per barrel, between $9 and $17. And his budgetary allocations were $9.5 billion, and to the most it was $16 billion. Today, the budgetary allocation is about $60 billion per year. He increased old age pension from $356 on 3 occasions to $620 for pensioners. In 3 years, the senior citizens' pension will increase 3 times. He introduced pension law reform in 1997 as prime minister. And those serving more than 10 years in the public service were able to get a pension. He introduced in 1996 the used car industry, which contributed significantly to the expansion and growth of middle-class ordinary men and women to be able to own a vehicle on their own. And he established transparency and accountability in public affairs. The executive was held accountable to parliamentary and legislative work teams, because he introduced a Constitutional Amendment Act and brought Parliament into parliamentary committees in 1999. There was a suite of legislation which passed: the Judicial Review Act, the Freedom of Information Act, the Equal Opportunities Act, and the Integrity in Public Life Act. Unfortunately, that is where he had to go to the courts to answer questions on that. Mr. Panday was really committed to every man, woman, and child, and to encourage a good quality of life for all citizens. And he worked towards that. So Mr. Panday had suffered intensely from political victimization, as Ferdie touched on. But I, being along with him, Wade Mark, myself, Chandra Sharma, there were photographs on the newspapers. We were like prisoners ourselves, because we couldn't see our political leader going through that difficulty, having to attend court so often because of intense political victimization by the Prime Minister and the PNM at that time. They were relentless in their persecution and prosecution of Mr. Panday. And he was the first Prime Minister to have gone through that for years upon years. And it's only recently the courts, the DPP said that the charges on one of the cases against Mr. Panday was dropped. And we remember collusion between Chief Magistrate and former Attorney General in trying to persecute Mr. Panday. So he was a victim of PNM brutality and victimization, a victim of the cruelty and heartlessness of the PNM. But the legend, the icon, the giant, the gladiator, the liberator, the freedom fighter, fought on. And so, as I come to an end, I want to bring together to the forefront a few of my interactions with Mr. Panday personally. I first met him in the 1970s at a function at my late brother, Justice Lloyd Gopeesingh, who acted on 2 occasions of Chief Justice during his time. He passed in 1997. Mr. Panday and Lloyd were legal colleagues then. They worked together in the courts in San Fernando. But in 1993, then as a member of the NAR, Mr. Panday invited me to work alongside him and the UNC to help him achieve his lifelong dream of national unity. And so as I mentioned, I brought the team together and we were victorious. And thereafter, from 1997 to 2001, I had the immense honor and privilege of serving under his pioneering UNC government in various portfolios, such as education and health, memorably as chairman of 2 RHAs, a senator, acting minister of integrated planning and development. And from 2002 to 2007 in opposition, I served as a senator and then Carinese member of parliament from 2007 to 2010 at Mr. Panday's behest. So Prime Minister Panday ran one of the best governments in this country's and region's history. And I must say proudly that I was part of another government under Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, which ran this country tremendously well with the competence and capability that both, I would think that the United National Congress governments of Mr. Panday and Mrs. Bissessar are 2 of the best governments that this country has ever had. His pioneering policies and initiatives ensured one of the best economic and social periods that Trinidad and Tobago has lived through. So, as I end, his lessons, teachings, wisdom, actions, his great vision for a truly united country of equality and justice, and his undeniable ability to beat all odds, to overcome all struggles and simply shine on. I remember he taught us, his mentees, most devoted supporters, the most important credentials of life in politics, which he easily summed up in 3 rules. Don't ever tell a lie, because it comes back to haunt you. Do what your conscience and heart tells you, and always do what is right. And on his 90th birthday, last year when I called him to wish him the happiest of birthdays, always the wise teacher, Mr. Panday gave me his unending advice and wisdom. He told me to not let regrets of the past haunt me and to move on in peace. And as I wanted to close by quoting, today, as our nation mourns the death of this truly great man, and we all endure grief with his passing, we take inspiration in his legacy, aptly encapsulated in the words of Leo Tolstoy, who once said, and I quote, "There is something in the human spirit that will survive and prevail. There is a tiny and brilliant light burning in the heart of man that will not go out no matter how dark the world becomes." May Basdeo Panday's great light continue to inspire us for generations to come. May his wonderful wife, Oma, who I have known for decades, his 4 daughters, the grandchildren, extended family, loved ones, and all my colleagues, may we find comfort during this trying time. And may his truly great soul rest in eternal peace. And may his soul attain moksha.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gopeesingh. Quite a detailed historical account of Mr. Panday's political career, and I really thank you for your last sentiments there.
It's a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you that we will take tributes from members of the live audience on Zoom after our 4 speakers have spoken. And we are now on to our 3rd speaker. This is Mrs. Suman Kapoor. She's the founder, president of the Global Organization of People of Indian Origin, GOPIO, in New Zealand. She has participated in international conferences in India, Europe, Australia, and Fiji. Welcome, Mrs. Kapoor. You can go ahead and speak.
Namaste, everyone. We have gathered on Zoom to mourn the death of our dear Basdeo Panday, a Trinidadian and a Tobagonian, a lawyer, politician, trade unionist, economics actor, and civil servant who served as fifth Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, 1995 to 2001. So on 1st of January, his soul left us, and just with the God, they are he's resting in peace. He was the first person of Indian descent, along with being the first Hindu to hold the office of PM of Trinidad and Tobago. Well, that's not new. My other speakers have also said a lot about him, but I will be touching a very different side, his jovial and very, very down to earth approach to general people like us. I met him first time in New York. That was the International Conference for Global Organization of People of Indian Origin International to celebrate 25 years. So, in our opinion, the essence of the role of GoPio International is to unify and highlight PIOs and NRIs. So when I met Mr. Basdeo Panday, somebody introduced at a social time, and Omaji was also with him, and that was in 2009. So he was such a down to earth person. He came and he started talking, and when he was talking, I could never even think that he is a past prime minister of a country. Then when he was narrating a few things, then somebody came and said, "Oh, do you know he's a past prime minister of Trinidad?" I said, "Oh, really?" And then Omaji and all singing, dancing, and we had a beautiful time together. A bond was made at that time. After that, he met me into several international conferences, which he used to come, either Pravasi Bharatiya Divas in India or some other occasions. Every time I found the same bond, every time I found the same same closeness, I must say. I'm not a political person, so I just don't know. But like it is said, he was an actor, so a lot he used to talk about Bollywood, this, that. And another very brief meeting with him was in 2016. Could you please show the photograph, please, Salima?
Hang on a minute, we'll bring that up for you.
It's all right. Just so I keep on talking about that. That was an occasion when it was a Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. Uttar Pradesh was being celebrated, and we were awarded as a Pravasi Uttar Pradeshi for our work in community, Hindi, and for women. So I received a big, along with a big trophy, along with our dear Ashook Ramsaran ji, which is who's coming next, and also Basdeo Panday ji was there. So everyone was recognizing him, but he came and he talked nicely. My father was there, and he met my father with so much of respect. He was telling about his Eastern origin and Uttar Pradeshi roots also. Something very, very close conversation, very frank, very, very smooth type of thing. No politics in this. And then my husband, my late husband, Pradeep Kapoor also came. He shook hand, and then he nicely met with my niece, who was a shoe designer, and he was so good to encourage women for the business. And like he was telling them that we all need to pull together and reset all the norms for women. uh, uh, they should go on the right path in the world, and how they can progress. Then he also had a group photo. Suddenly said, "Oh, Omaji came running, and he was sitting. Both of them were sitting with me, and we had a nice click of the moment." That is shown here somewhere now. Salimaji is going to show. So during all his meetings, we could never think that, oh, he's so many steps up, or he is doing so much on the other side of world. Because I'm from New Zealand, and in New Zealand, just Indian population is, as per the latest 2023, this is the population which is ever increasing. So it is almost 3,008,000, which is a big number looking into the small this country. Similarly, Trinidad and Tobago also has not that big population, but yeah. So here you can see on the screen the photograph, such a nice photograph. And he was also honored. You can see the white shawl he was offered at that time, and myself. And it was such a, and along with us, then our member of parliament of Indian origin, Mr. Kamaljeet Bakshi, he also came. He was MP from ruling National Party. He came. He said, "Let's have a moment of remembrance always." So this photograph is very close to me. And my father was 90 plus. He came specially for that occasion. He was so happy to be there. In this photo, you can see Kamaljeet Bakshi backline standing, and then Swati Mehrotra, who's a shoe designer, and my father, my husband, and sitting is Oma Pandeyji, Basdeo Panday, and myself. So, yeah, several people must have had a different experience with him, but my personal experience has always been that such person who can understand things deeply rooted in Indian diaspora. So when he talks and he relates, he was a very good orator. He relates with that and non-stop talking, so make people comfortable. So that's so good about him. And on this day, like we are mourning, but at the same time, Almighty God has given him opportunity to spend 91 years with his full family, children, grandchildren, and all near and dear ones who were around him when he passed away. So that's a blessing. That's our good wishes always, to give good. And you see, whosoever comes goes. It's a rule of the world. It's a moment of truth. So he went, and he left a legacy to be followed by all other around the globe. I pray for him, chanting 3 times Om, and praying Shanti for him. Om. 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 Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kapoor. Very moving end there. And thank you very much for sharing social aspects of the man, Mr. Pandey. We appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to bring on our fourth and final speaker now, and this is Mr. Ashook Ramsaran, the president of the Indian Diaspora Council, former president of Gopeesingh. Born in Guyana, he is a board member of the New York Presbyterian Hospital and Center for Caribbean and Latin American Studies at St. John's University, and much, much more. Mr. Ramsaran, welcome.
Thank you very much. Can you start the slide? Okay. It's a rough way to start the new year, and I'm grateful that I'm invited to discuss my experiences knowing the late Honorable Basdeo Panday, whom I've known for several years. I want to recognize, before I begin, Minister Tim Gopeesingh, who said such superb things about our late friend, Dr. Arnold Thomas from St. Vincent, Shamsuddin. What a pleasure to see you here. You've been so helpful to the late president to find his roots. Boise Seal, our condolences to you in the passing of your dear wife and others as well. Suman ji, condolences to you in passing of your husband as well. Basdeo Panday was a good friend, and he made me feel comfortable in Trinidad more than in Guyana, where I was born. My presentation focuses primarily on my relationship with him, in particular, the experiences and encounters which allowed me to share those moments that exemplify the man, his character, his courage, charm, wit, and valiant spirit, which helped transform the twin island of Trinidad and Tobago. There are many others who knew him better than I have, and I'm sure they will say their piece one way or another in several other forums. We share the same recognition by the Government of India, Pravasi Samman Award, his in 2005, which I'll talk about later, and mine in 2011. To sum it up, he was a no-holds-barred person. The life and legacy of Basdeo Panday has left an indelible mark on the nation, its people, the Trinidad diaspora, the Indian diaspora, and nations of the Caribbean, the Commonwealth, and India. Slide number 2, please. In the annals of modern history, only a few actors have become well-known and respected national political leaders. Prime Minister Basdeo Panday ranks among Reagan and Zelensky. Basdeo Panday exemplified the true courageous spirit of a Trinidad national who was a person of Indian origin and a Hindu, and unabashed in making it that known in his behavior, his speeches, and interviews. He was the pride of Trinidad and Tobago. He's a very articulate speaker, an orator with skillful use of language to make his points succinctly and with clarity that impressed heads of state and audiences. At times, he seemed abrasive, but highly respected for telling it like it is. Publicly, he said things we all would like to say ourselves. Basdeo Panday had a passion for the things he did with unmatched determination and zeal, which are character traits that will live on for generations to come. He evoked inspiration and pride past colonial time. Slide 3, please. The formation of GOPIO in 1988. Basdeo Panday was an integral participant in the formation of the Global Organization of People of Indian Origin at the 1988 convention in New York. Together with Fiji's Mahendra Chowdhury and Guyana's Shadi Jagan, he was a towering and vocal proponent on the formation of a global organization representing the interests of Indians globally, in particular those of previous generations born outside of India. It was here that the term person of Indian origin, PIO, was firmly established and Gopio was launched at a time of euphoria and excitement. Among the many participants, Ravi Dev, Yeshu Prasad, Mahin Gosai, Beto Ramarak, Vishnu Vishram, Rupnarayan Prasad, Dev Gosai, Ramesh Kalicharan, and many, many others of Caribbean origin. Slide 4. Basdeo Panday was one of the keynote speakers at this event, the Human Rights Conference at St. John's University in New York. An array of prominent Indian diaspora representatives include Fiji's Mahendra Chowdhury, Ravi Dev, Rian Shah of Guyana, US and Canadian diaspora participants. It was convened at St. John's University in New York, and a commemorative magazine was produced. Slide 5. In 2005, Basdeo Panday was accorded the highest recognition of a person of Indian origin outside of India at the annual Pravasi Bharatiya Divas PBD, the prestigious Pravasi Suman Award. It was a time of euphoria and excitement for all of us attending and those back in Trinidad and Tobago. Basdeo Panday was well received by the government of India, and he delivered a stirring, emotional speech on what it means to be the son of a water carrier, now standing on the international stage. Basdeo Panday noted that we are the same, though generations apart. We have matured and evolved, living in multi-ethnic societies in relatively peaceful coexistence. Later, I chaired a panel session on tracing our roots, and Panday was one of the panelists. Interestingly, our session was concluding as actor Amitabh Bachchan entered the room to be a panelist in the next session. And this is an interesting side note. A clandestine meeting was organized by myself, Dev Gosai, and Vishnu Bishram to have Panday and Ramesh Maharaj meet at the convention hotel to reconcile their differences. While Dev and Vishnu got the two of them to come into the room without spouses or others knowing, I calmly and diplomatically appealed to their long-standing friendship, and reconciliation was achieved after about an hour of conversation. I arranged for a bottle of wine. When Panday entered the room, he said, "What the hell? Do you think I'll drink wine on top? Let's get some scotch here." So we had the scotch brought in. Panday and Maharaj had the scotch. I had the wine. But it was a successful reconciliation, and I'm proud of that moment. Panday later visited an ancestral village in Uttar Pradesh and met with his cousins and relatives. It was an emotional homecoming. Thanks to Shamsuddin for tracing Panday's relatives from the archival records in Trinidad and Tobago. Slide 6. Basdeo Panday was a keynote speaker at the Gopio Convention in London, and it was about women's issues. Others in attendance include Lord Diljit Rana, Lord Desai, Lord Dalakia, cricketer Alvin Kalicharan, historian Clem Ciceran, economist Vishnu Prasad, poet Lakshmi Prasad, originally from Trinidad, Rita Abrams from South Africa, and many others from USA. Slide 7. Besides the events and the meetings, there was also personal interaction. He loved to embrace and engage. In New York, at the home of the travel span Nohar Singh, a very casual evening. At the home of Indian Consul General in New York, another casual evening. Slide 8. At UWI St. Augustine, when Dr. Yeshu Prasad was accorded the honorary doctorate degree. We also met in Brussels at the EU, at his home with Ina Maharaj, when he discussed the art of growing tomatoes after retirement. Actually, Basdeo Panday never retired. He was a consummate voice whenever and wherever needed. He interjected himself many times as well. But he also, as Tim Gopeesingh said, the art of happiness. And to me, he explained that means growing tomatoes and eating tomatoes. And we had several conversations, including the time after his arrest, while an Indian delegation was visiting Trinidad and Tobago. It was a very embarrassing moment. nationally and internationally. Slide 8. Okay, going back to, yes, that's slide 9. There's many other photos, and I've just made a selection of them. Remembering and acknowledging, I'll conclude with the following. We need to recognize a lifetime of extraordinary achievement, at times unconventional, unpredictable, the silver fox, the fighter, the warrior, the freedom fighter. His inspiration as a leader and impact of me and others must always be remembered. Panday's impact on Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean and the Indian diaspora. He has said very notably the difference between a just nation and just a nation. Very big difference. And he expounded on that in many conversations with me. The lessons of Panday's political career should be for scholars and historians to read, to decipher, to analyze, and to learn from. I have proposed a Trinidad and Tobago postage stamp honoring Basdeo Panday. I also, at this point, propose that UWI/TT a scholarship in his name and a monument at St. Park because he deserves it. We need to identify those things that will make his legacy something for all ages. Final comment is what we leave as a history of our journeys, as a roadmap and a legacy for others to understand and appreciate. Basdeo Panday left an enormous lot for us. Goodbye, my friend. Rest in peace. Condolences to Mrs. Uma Panday, Michaela, and the other children, and the grandchildren as well. Thank you very much. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramsaran. Mr. Panday's life in pictures with you. We really appreciate your sharing. The one thing I wanted to ask you, though, your Guyanese background. Can you please comment on Mr. Panday's influence on the people of Guyana? Or his contribution to Guyana in any way?
He was one of the fighters like Chetty Jagan at the time of colonial control of the two colonies, former colonies. And he fought for independence because he felt that that's the way for the countries to flourish on their own. And he achieved that. It's interesting that you asked that question. Both Mr. Panday and Dr. Jagan were educated overseas. Dr. Jagan in the US and Mr. Panday in UK. Interestingly, both died in the USA and were flown separately, of course, in airplanes that took them back to be buried in their homeland. But he did open up the eyes of people in Guyana. Of course, Trinidad was much more affluent, and so the urge for migration was less than that of Guyana. Guyanese overwhelmingly are more prevalent in US, Canada, and UK, whereas the Trinidadians had a relatively good life because of oil. But that does not prevent the outpouring of education and scholarship. But Dr. Panday, Mr. Panday, he should be called Dr. Panday, by the way. He can be remembered for being an engaging person, an embracing person, and he had this smile and wit and charm that the politicians of Guyana do not readily show that in public. Does that answer?
Thank you very much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've had 4 speakers for today, and I want to thank each of you for your excellent contributions. I want to open the floor now to members of the audience who would like to pay tribute to Mr. Panday. To identify yourself, please raise your electronic hand. If you look at the base of your screen, you will see a reactions button. If you click on the reactions button, you will see a raise hand icon. Please go ahead and raise your hand now. Excellent. Mr. Dwarka, I really wanted to call on you first. Today should have been a day for us to hear your life story as well. And I really appreciate the fact that you would like to speak about instead, Mr. Panday. Please go ahead and unmute. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shalina. And first, let me say my heartfelt sympathies to Omar and the siblings. I don't know if they are, well, they will have access to this program online. I know it's online as well. I remember I am originally from Debe, and like Mr. Panday, and thanks again to Mr. Shamsuddin, he assisted me to find my ancestors in Allahabad, India. And in a lot of ways, I could identify with Mr. Pandey's journey as well. We have similar interests. I did not have the opportunity like him to serve in those areas. In politics, I stayed away from it. He rightly said, it has a morality of its own. It is also one of the reasons I stayed away from law as well, because my conscience, I have a very, very strong conscience. If you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, you're right. But this is not about me. It's about Mr. Panday. I remember listening to this slim, thin gentleman with a big mouth. And in those days, keeping long hair was the style. On Debe Junction, standing up with the mic next to Stephen Maraj. I think that would have been his debut. And I had no inkling, just like my own life, I don't know where I would have ended up, that he would end up being prime minister. I followed his career all along. He was also a musician, he used to play tabla. I think that's how he met Omar, when he and his brother-in-law used to sing. He's a very, very good singer, avid singer. And what I want to emphasize in this meeting as one of the legacies, I know there are so many people who would like to express, but I have listened to even the last interview with Ryan Bechu, paid attention to what Mr. Panday has been saying all his life, that we need constitutional reform in this country, because we have just been exchanging governments with all the best intention, and him too with his best intentions, not being able to weld this society together in spite of all the efforts of Mr. Gopeesingh, and I appreciate his recognition of the efforts of Mr. Panday. I lived in the sugar industry in the South, and I am now living in central Trinidad. I know firsthand when these workers would only get 1 day for the fortnight to keep their badge, what a tremendous difference it made to their lives, from having to trust food all through the season time and have to deal with the shopkeeper and the dehumanization that went with that kind of thing. I don't think people fully appreciate in this society, fully what Mr. Panday really did for this population. He represented me in Chaguanas, Couva North. I voted for him every time. And I know the man. I didn't know him personally, but I followed his work. I have the greatest admiration for him. And it is indeed a great loss for all of us. However, it may not be, it could still be redeemed if we who are here, any of us with any level of influence, can effect that change that he always, that was his battle cry. We must have constitutional reform, proportional representation, so that every segment of the society could have a voice. The politics, I am 78 now, 77, and is the same and the same and the same and the same, just exchange. I think hopefully it will be done probably in some other people's lifetime, but that's the way we need to go. Thank you all very much for hosting this, Dr. Mahabir and Shalima, for hosting this forum so that we could really, give voice to our feelings and our emotions at this time. Thank you again.
Thank you for being part of it, Mr. Dwarka. We appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not seeing any other raised hands, and I invite you, please do raise your hand if you would like to say something. I'm seeing several comments in the chat, and I'll ask Mr. Gangadas, please, let me just take Mr. Tara Singh, and Mr. Gangadas, I'll invite you to please read what you've written in the chat so that our audience, especially those on YouTube, as well as those who will be recorded later,
Yes.
can go
Thank you
ahead.
very much, and thank you to the listeners. I just want to make a comment, something very profound. Mr. Pandey said when we had the international conference of the Remain, which was a few years ago, he made a very profound statement, said that if you want to look at good governance, make a good study of the Remain, which is a classic case of good governance. That resonated in my, and he showed his arguments, did extracts from the Remain to prove his case. Now, in terms of contribution to Guyana, Mr. Pandey made a very significant decision to write off several $100 million of debt to Guyana in 2004. The opposition, PNM, was against that, but nevertheless, Mr. Pandey went ahead and wrote off that debt. So that was a very significant contribution to Guyana. Thank you, and once again, I congratulate the various speakers for making their respective presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tara Singh, and for reminding us about his contributions to Guyana. Jay Nair from South Africa, now in Canada.
Good afternoon, everybody, or good day. I'm having goosebumps because I grew up in a political family and saw politics from a very early age. And when you talk about Mr. Pandey's, changes in Trinidad and Tobago, it gives me pride that I'm an Indian. The other thing is, before going any further, I want to convey my heartfelt condolences to the Panday family and friends and the group that spoke on his behalf or for him and emulated all the good things that he's done in his lifetime. We had people like that and we have lost them, and we've got some of them who are still around, but for people to do what Mr. Pandey has done, there need to be what we call a determination to show to the people of the country or to people of the world that we are one part of the human family. And that is what he's done. And whatever he's done, I feel proud as a non-Trinidadian. I feel proud of being an Indian. And being an Indian where somebody has shown some examples of Tolstoy, some examples of Karl Marx, some examples of Lenin, and so on and so forth. You talk about a communist, but this is not communism. This is about people-centered values to look after people. Simple. It's a simple part of life. So thanks for me coming today and thanking myself because I've been delinquent. And I am happy and proud to know of Mr. Pandey. Now I can relate. There was somebody in my country that did what we want done, even up to this day. Thank you very much, Shalima, Kumar, and others on the panel for a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay. A transformative leader takes a little bit of what is good in all other leadership styles, and that was Mr. Pandey. Thanks for that reminder. Uncle Sham, we have a question in the chat and several people are supporting it. Can a copy of the documentary of Mr. Pandey's ancestral search in India be made available for public viewing? So I will leave it up to you to describe that search. Can you unmute? You're still muted.
Still on mute, yeah. Okay, great.
Yes.
Yes, okay, yeah, if I could answer that before I start my presentation or my reactions. You'll have to speak to Gideon Hanuman Singh. You know, he's the one who has the original, he did it himself and so on, you know, so for me to present that, it will be kind of copyright problems and so on. So I think you better approach him. And I think he's quite willing to share it with you. I'm sure about that, yeah. Okay, first of all, may I also express my condolences to the family of Mr. Panday, who, two of them who I know, three of them who I was fortunate to meet, his wife, Oma, his daughter, Vatsala, who was a little child at the time of this meeting at Lakmanpur in Uttar Pradesh, India, when they visited. I remember there were tears that were cried, and probably, I don't know if the public had the opportunity of what I had to see Mr. Panday cry. I'm asking Mr. Gopeesingh and Dr. Gopeesingh and others, did you ever have that opportunity to see tears shed from Mr. Panday? And that's what I was lucky to see. Well, it was tears of joy, of course, when he met and hugged his family in Lakmanpur, Uttar Pradesh, India. I must say it's a pleasure for me to be able to talk in the presence of people like Dr. Ferrera and Dr. Ramsaran, and also the other presenters. I am so delighted to be able to do this. You know, one of the things that stood out about Mr. Panday and was mentioned by Vashan Bharat in his contribution on the newspaper is that he never heard Mr. Panday say anything ill in a kind of racial way about the other groups in the society. And I want to vouch for that because he always encouraged me when I mentioned how I would not only be seeking out Indian roots, but try to work with the other groups as well. And he thought that was such a fantastic thing. In fact, in my second book, if you have an opportunity, or if you get a chance to see it, you will see that he mentioned that in the words at the beginning, in his foreword to my book, that he said that he's so glad to see that I am reaching out to other groups. Because in my field of genealogy, I really would like to see many people of other groups able to do that little aspect of their lives. It's a little aspect and many people don't see the importance of it and so on, fine. But there are people who see the importance of it and it's very good. People like Mr. Panday who saw that importance because he was so delighted to visit his family in India, and we were so lucky. I'm going to say we because Dr. Tiwari and I were the ones who worked out the family, Dr. Tiwari from India, and we worked out the family. We did it because we were able to find at our National Archives in Trinidad, so I'm giving a plug for them as well. They were able to have and save those documents for me to be able to research it and to find out, because most of us in Trinidad, and I near say for the diaspora, may not know that village from which our ancestors came, or those villages. Because now we in Trinidad, whatever race we are or group, we are a composite of peoples. So we are not only from the village of Lakmanpur. Later on, I was able to find, as Mr. Dwarika said, I was able to find his family and so on, and for other people as well. And I tell people that to look at the work that Mr. Panday has done in the many different areas, you know, and to see him treat you like if you are special. You know, he always did that. I noticed it with so many other people. And even when he was talking to the thousands, I think they estimated the crowd about 40,000 in India had come out to see him. He found time to say thanks to me. And of course, we don't look for thanks, but when you get that kind of thing, it's very invigorating, it's very encouraging, motivating to what you're trying to do. So Mr. Panday, we'll miss him tremendously. Even up till lately, I had a reunion. I had several reunions with my different branches of my own family. And I invited Mr. Panday, and he came to the 160th anniversary of the ancestor of mine who started all of this in my mind, because he was the one, John Manradine was his name, who was celebrating, we his descendants were celebrating his 160th year in Trinidad. And I asked Mr. Panday and he said yes. And I thought he had forgotten. And one day I was driving in the back of New Grant, and on my phone I could see Mr. Panday's name. So I knew he was calling me. So I had to pull up under a bamboo patch, and because I didn't want to talk when I'm driving. And I listened, and he said, how are the plans coming out for the function? I said, fine, and we're looking forward to it. He said, yes, I am all ready. And he did come on the 10th of April, 2018. We had that function in San Fernando, and he was there and spoke and won the crowd as usual, and the same way he won the crowds in Trinidad, and the same way he won the 40,000 in India who shouted Basdeo Panday Zindabad. That means long live Basdeo Panday. So those memories are etched in me, and of course to my friend Dr. Tiwari in India and others. It's such a delightful experience, and was very similar when we also fortunate to work out Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisesa. And I noticed somebody say you should call him Dr. Panday. Well, he was Dr. Panday, right? Because he got honorary doctorates from UTT in Trinidad, from the Hindu University at Banaras in India, and so on. So he was given his doctorate. Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Uncle Sham, for those reminders as well. If we could see him now, what do you think he would be saying?
Mr. Panday?
I'm sure he's looking down on you now,
Yes.
and you just heard everything you said.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm sure he will say my friend, because he did call me his friend when he didn't even know that I never knew him on a personal level. Who wouldn't know Mr. Panday? You know, because that was my first interaction with him was at Lakmanpur. Would you believe that? Because I had known Subhash well. I myself was an A-level student teacher at St. Stephen's College in Princestown when Subhash was an A-level student. I didn't teach Subhash, but he knew me. When they became government in 1995, they had a function at Princestown, and I was invited by the Princestown Regional Corporation to be there because I was living in Princestown at the time. And Subhash saw me, but Mr. Panday himself couldn't make the function. He was busy at that night. And Subhash ran up to me and said, Mr. Dean, you have to trace my family for me. Well, one of the things I always did is I always have a little notebook in my pocket and a pen. So I said, okay, tell me what you know. And his mamu, his mother's brother, was still alive near to transport ground. And I went there the next day, spoke to him. He gave me the arrival scenario that I try to get for everybody who wants this done. And I went to the documents in the National Archives, and the details came out at me that they had come to Bonitento Estate, Subanti and Ajodia. That was the grandparents. And they had, one of the things I should mention is that they were they were in Fiji before. So I remember one of the first articles I wrote on the newspapers in Trinidad is Fiji's loss. Because I said that if the grandparents didn't come to Trinidad, we wouldn't have had Mr. Panday being born in Trinidad. So that's what and I think he remembered all of that. He talked about it. And whatever function involving roots, especially like Mr. Ramsaran so nicely said, that function in 2005 at Mumbai, when Mr. Panday served as the chairman of the forum that we had on roots. He mentioned about his grandfather. The people in India were surprised to know that how could a man with a name like Panday could go and visit an Ahir family, because Ahir is a lower caste of milk gatherers and so on. And how could that happen? And Mr. Panday said, well, you know, they didn't realize it on the boat and so on. They started, in India, they say, well, maybe he was a water carrier carrying pani. So that's why they call him Panday, Panday and so on. So anyway, I could talk forever on him, but let me give others a chance, please. Yeah.
Thank you so
very
much.
for the
Thank
opportunity.
you.
Yeah.
So Arnold Thomas, St. Vincent. Arnold, please unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Welcome.
good. Hi, everyone. First, let me join others in commending all the very, very good things said eloquently about our good friend, our late friend, Basdeo Panday. I've had the honor of meeting Mr. Panday on several occasions. I would say it's thanks to one of the speakers there, Ashook Ramsaran. In 2007, I think it was. First of all, the SVG Indian Heritage Foundation was founded in 2006. I was still living in Brussels. And then in 2007, I think there was a meeting in Brussels when I met Ashook for the first time. And that triggered and started something that's, in fact, it changed my whole life, because after 2007, I got fully involved in conferences and meetings of people of Indian origin and the global organization of people, global organization, what am I saying? Global Organization of People of Indian Origin again. Also, what got me more involved, and I'd just like to mention that currently I am the SVG coordinator for the IDC, the Indian Diaspora Council. So over the years, given all of that background, over the years, I've had the privilege of meeting Mr. Panday in several places in the Caribbean, in the US, and in India. And one of the things that really stands out for me with Mr. Panday is his character. He was a very cool, as somebody said, very cool person, but he had a big mouth and he spoke from the heart. And I tell you, he has become for me a model, and I would say he should be a model for all Indians, coming from a background like he did, and he ended up being all those things, from being a lawyer, a politician, and a speaker, and everything else. What a model! So when we started our Indian Heritage Foundation in St. Vincent, we had a meeting here in 2012, and it was very good. And we looked at a number of persons of Indian origin who could be modeled for us, and he certainly was one of those. And I must say, it was thanks to our director there, Dr. Kumar, and you, Shalima. You remember that event. And when we think of all those events in 2012 and afterwards, we have to keep in mind Mr. Panday, because he had become a real model for all of us. So my final word on this one is, look, it's his memory is going to last for, and should last for a long time. And he should be a model for a lot of young people, especially young Indians in countries like Myanmar, where the Indian population is very small. But we have managed to keep our heritage alive. Although we say we are just like Trinidad to the bones, we say we are Vinci to the bones, but we also recognize that we are Indian, we have our Indian heritage and the Indian history to keep up. And it's thanks to people like Basdeo Panday, who will always remain our model, that we remain committed to that Indian heritage. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Arnold, and thank you for doing all the good work that you're doing there in St. Vincent as well. Really appreciate your sentiments about our Basdeo Panday. Let's have our Ramsaran now. Ramsaran, please go ahead and mute your mic.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I had the great privilege of sharing a platform with Dr. Basdeo Panday in 1986 or so. I stand to be corrected. I was just a young lawyer in Toronto, and thousands of refugee claimants were coming in to Toronto from Guyana and Trinidad. And of course, many people disbelieved that they were refugees, even lawyers, because they did not even read the definition of a refugee. But Basdeo Panday was there on the platform, invited by a group from Trinidad, and he gave great courage to the hundreds and thousands who were making refugee claims without being supported, and who at that time were said to be fraudulent refugees. If I had the foresight of Ashook Ramsaran, I probably would be more organized and have a picture for you, but unfortunately, I didn't know I was standing in the company of greatness. We definitely should immortalize men like these. And I have one respectful suggestion, because these records that we are referring to in the archives in many countries, not only Trinidad and Guyana, I understand that they're in a deplorable condition. And I think we should make a concerted effort to persuade these governments to digitalize them so that they can be accessible very easily. Without Mr. Panday being so prominent, he probably wouldn't have had the ability to trace his ancestry. Same thing with Kamla Bisisar, same thing with Bara Jagdeo, and many others. If they're heads of nations, they have access. But what about the poor man who can't travel and who has very little knowledge about his background? I salute all those who have spoken, and I hope that the suggestion is taken seriously to immortalize men like these. We can have these archives, or part of it, named after them, so we can know that they were Hindus and they were attached to the country, which is now making big waves across the globe, Bharat, that is India. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramnarayan. I would like to think that perhaps India might be interested in what you are saying as well, because it seems to me that their archives ought to recognize sons of the soil who would have made the kind of contributions and leave the legacy that Mr. Panday has made. And at the same time, I want to say thank you for people like Mr. Shamsuddin. I'm sure that there are lots of searches that were done by you pro bono, simply because you love what you do. And we really appreciate you doing that. Thank you so much. Dr. Yvonne Bobsmith, over to you now, ma'am. Can you unmute there?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me start by saying I come here with great pride to meet my former student in such an important position. I also want to say, like the Cubans would say, to my brothers, Dr. Ranjit Kumar, Dr. Kumar Mahavir, and Dr. Gopeesingh. They might not want to call me sister, but I'm calling them brothers. I have very little to say, simply because I have not been involved in politics, and I very grateful for those who made such a wide, extensive, intensive presentation to get us all to know so much about Mr. Panday, Dr. Panday. My little piece is because I think I consider myself a humanist, and I look at behaviors that people show around people. And one of the things I picked up with Dr. Panday was he was people-oriented, and it was put there in what we heard today was in the political sense, but I think that it was more than that. And therefore I asked the question, why is it we are so divided? Diversity for me means togetherness, inclusivity, and intermingling with due respect and accountability for difference. Many of us misunderstand diversity and express, and because our expressions of it still causes our country to remain divisive. Whatever we believe in seems to strengthen dominance and feature othering. We do this because we do not know who we really are. And the last speaker, I think, touched on exactly what I want to expand a bit. And this is where I sort of tweaked at Basdeo Panday's life and saw, like a person who would have made a bigger hit on the humanities, which include culture, than has been made up to now. And I will just illustrate with two little stories. A heckler saw Dr. Panday on the platform. He said, Basdeo boy, Mr. Panday said, yes, brother. The heckler said, you're a jackass. Mr. Panday said, that is why I call you brother. The next one, which I think was the greatest of his show of what our history means to us, is when a media presenter said to him, pleased to have you on, Mr. Panday, our first Indian Prime Minister. Basdeo Panday said, Indian Prime Minister? The Indian Prime Minister is in India? And how many of us still can feel that way about him? Remember, that was a powerful statement in my understanding of the anthropology of our country. And maybe if he had a team of people to carry us into believing that we are a Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago people first. Many people came here not with cell phones in their hand and what you call it, bags. They came to make rich people richer in whatever system. And the first system was to get rid of people who owned a culture, a land, the first system, and that was genocide. So now look at us as human beings. We want to get together. And suddenly we are African, Portuguese, Indian. It blows my mind. And what is very frightening is that we do not turn up the research to see how many families in the 20th century, 19th century were mixed people. We then divide those people. They're not Indian, they're not African, you divide and we go on like that. Maybe I just have a dream. I will be 93 in a couple of days' time. And I have a dream that the legacy that he has left is to say, I want to see cultural heritage learning institutionalized. Let us know who we are. And I'm not saying this because of my feelings, my love, my emotion, but because I'm hearing from young people. I'm hearing from young people. Most young people only know up to Sparrow. Just think of that, up to Sparrow. They didn't know anything before. When I was growing up, I remember Executor, Lord Executor, was praised by my parents. Attila the Hun, those were great philosophers. And yet still, nobody's teaching, bringing all these facts together. Another thing I scared some young people the other day. Somebody said, have you got money? I say, Paisanaba. He said, what is that? But that was a saying my mother used, and she wasn't an Indian. She was a Trinidadian. Paisanaba, Gail, I have no money. Some of you might remember that. And there were several other Hindi and Spanish and French statements that were made. What a beautiful combination that would be if for 5 minutes I could go off in the corner and I'm talking with Trinidadian. That's why I always look at Jamaicans with pride. They have all the degrees in the world, but they could hit you, they're Jamaican. And so I am appealing to the young, not so young, active and not so active, to call for cultural heritage learning. Not somebody coming to give a talk and put up 2-point PowerPoint. Cultural heritage learning, which we had a little bit of some years ago at Costat. Students were put, it was like what my mom used to put
put the cat in the milk. The students were brought in to see what heritage is about at the seats of the differences. And I think it would make us nationalize. It would sorry, not nationalize, but it would cause us to feel much more comfortable understanding each other. Boring. This is not ignoring difference. This is understanding. Yes, I know it. I love it. Not hating it. I know it. It has to be there. Fighting for it. If it is from another ethnicity, we are very slow. And I wish that we could go a little faster to create a nation where our culture is who we are and not what somebody say we are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bob Smith, and thanks so much for your support all the time. You just reminded me that, Dr. Panday never forgot to be a true Trini. Despite his station in life, he never forgot to be a true Trini. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you so much to all our speakers for today. And Mr. Ramnaresh Dwarka's sister, Banu, shared something that she had put together, which I think is an excellent way to end today's program. And I will share it with you now. Shakir?
परमात्मा से है मेरी आत्मा अब चल कर ले मिलन परमानंद का अनुभव कर ओ परमानंद का अनुभव कर तू धन्य बना जीवन.
And it is only when I became interested in I'm familiar and attended a few lectures. I'm familiar with what the Raj Yoga were doing. I began to conceptualize God as a light, as a power, a force that I don't understand, but I could conceptualize it as a light. And if I could conceptualize God as a light, He's no longer He. He's no longer she. He is it. And for that, I wish to thank the Raj Yoga. And he was destroying his life. And it is the Raj Yoga people, Sister Helata in particular, I think, who rescued him.
A doubt in my heart that I do not have a single enemy that I can think of. A lot of this work has been because of the Brahma Kumari. When Sister Hemlata came here in the early days, she went to a place called St. Julian where I was born. And she met a man by the name of Manik Bisoon. Sister, you remember him, don't you? And Manik Bisoon became a convert and introduced me to him. And through this organization, I have gained enough and sufficient. I need more in order to fulfill the purpose of my life. Brahma Kumari, with all my heart, I thank you and the organization to which you belong, the Brahma Kumaris. May Bhagwan shower upon you all the choicest blessings.
You notice that his voice is a little bit hoarse, right?
That's because I'm not shouting at people.
I want you to have a cup of ginger tea when you go home. And for our dear sister Uma, who specially called me to ensure that you were here.
ज्योति बिंदु परमात्मा से ज्योति बिंदु परमात्मा से
ओम शांति ओम शांति ओम शांति ओम
Mr. Pandey has indeed seen the light, and we hope he attains moksha. Over to Shakira.
Thank you, Shalama. And thank you to our presenters for their sacrifice and for giving freely of their time, their experience, their knowledge, and their expertise. And we want to thank all the members of our audience on Zoom and on YouTube for attending and participating. And Shalama, thank you for being a wonderful moderator. And as we said earlier, this public meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, and you can feel free to contact the ICC to publish your books and reports and to kindly give us your suggestions as well as donations, and you can contact Dr. Mahabir for those details. We want to thank our advisory and planning team led by Dr. Kumar Mahabir, and usually we have our IT manager, Ravin Ramsingh, with us, and we want to wish him a happy birthday today. And we want to thank Miriam Mohammed for producing our TikTok videos. So our topic next Sunday will be a documentary film on Dr. Hassan Khan, finding his ancestral family in India. So please visit our YouTube channel to see all our past recordings. I am Shakira Mohammed saying goodbye. May God bless you all. Danyaba.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank everybody for coming. So it was nice to have all of you and to stay so long for 2 hours. So our condolences to the family of Basdeo Panday. So many people miss him. Black, white, short, tall, Trinidadian, non-Trinidadian. He was truly an icon. Okay, Shalima, last word and let's close.
Thank you all very much again, and hope to see you all next week when we feature Dr. Moritz Hassan Khan from Suriname before we lose him too.